Hi, and welcome to this session on Fintech South. I'm John Dreckney. I'm the CEO of the Merchant Advisory Group. And just a short introduction of myself. My group helps merchants have a voice in the payment ecosystem. So we have about 165 members who we represent, which range from some of the largest to some of the medium-sized merchants. And our goal is to help make sure that when new technology enters into the marketplace, that it's merchant ready. And I'm happy to say I've got three of the smartest people I know in payments with me today to talk about what they're actually doing in the marketplace, because I think you'll find them a lot more interesting to me. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So first, I'll bring up Joe Vasterling with Best Buy. Joe.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you're good, Joe.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. As John said, I'm Joe Vasterling. I work at Best Buy, and I am in our financial services area. I'm responsible for third-party payments and our Best Buy branded gift cards. And so I do a lot of work with our acquirers, our networks, and from an advocacy perspective, I participate a lot in the industry with the MAG, US Payments Forum, and other types of advocacy work. Really excited to have this conversation today. I'll hand it over to Jamie.
Hi, everyone. Jamie Henry with Walmart. I work in our treasury payments team at Walmart. Been with the company going on 11 years now, always in that space. Our team overall has responsibility for consumer electronic payment acceptance across our full enterprise. So that's our Walmart US stores, our Sam's Clubs, and then all the countries that we operate in. It's probably 26 or so countries now. Our responsibilities on the team, very similar to Joe's. I've got what we call emerging payments. So that's everything to do with where mobile payments are accepted, e-commerce payments. I also have our closed loop gift card and our acceptance of government benefits, which have really become a lot more prominent in these days of COVID. And then also our, how we pay our associates on a pay card. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to Sorin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Sorin Hilgen. I'm the CIO of EG America for almost a year now. We're a fuel and convenience store retailer with about 1,700 locations across the US. I've been in the retail space for over 10 years with Cumberland Farms and Gulf Oil along the way. And it's a real pleasure to be here alongside these distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Joe, Jamie, and Sorin for those introductions. So I'm going to just set us up for a little bit, and then I'll let these experts get to help you guys understand what's happening in the marketplace and where we're going. But we're definitely in unprecedented times, and the market is changing very quickly. And these merchants had to adapt very, very quickly in order to serve their customers. Whether it was you're working from home now and you needed a laptop and Best Buy had to figure out how to enable that, or whether it was making sure you had enough toilet paper so that everything was good and Jamie had to figure that, or whether you were an essential worker and you needed fuel for you to be able to get back and forth to your job so that you could provide the services that you provided. All of these merchants worked extremely hard to figure out how to make the environment work more seamlessly and safer. And what you'll see when we talk about this is it resulted in a major shift in what we've seen in payments. So traditionally, most of these merchants on here saw most of their customers coming into their locations and presenting physical plastics or mobile phone in some cases in order to complete transaction, where what they'll talk about is a lot of that now has gone to cloud type fulfillment, in which they're using that payment over the cloud in order to fulfill it. Some of it's through stored, some of it's through consumer input, but all of it has become a different type of transaction. And the one good thing to say about most of these merchants that I have with me today is they've all been innovative in the space. And so when COVID hit, for a lot of them, it wasn't ground up startups, but it was an acceleration of what they've already started. And they'll talk about what they've seen in that acceleration overall in the marketplace. But I'm really excited to have them here, and I really want them to spend most of the time talking, because I think their stories and what they've seen happen in the marketplace and where they're headed and what they would, most importantly, what else needs to happen to enable those transactions to happen more seamlessly for the customers, I think is what you will find interesting. So, so let's get started with the questions. So Joe, I know that Best Buy had always been using, or for a long time, had been using their stores for e-commerce fulfillment. But I think what really changed with COVID is how you then deliver products through the stores, where all of a sudden your stores were no longer accessible to customers, but the product was. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you guys made that transition, what you saw in that transition, and how well it worked for Best Buy?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, John. So we definitely we already had kind of an online fulfillment kind of taking place with our buy online, pick up in store. And so in the middle of Q1, we had to kind of really quickly shift to seamlessly implement a new and highly effective operating model in the matter of 48 hours with curbside only pickup. So we are, to your point, we're already in the process of piloting online curbside pickup in a few stores, but with the increase in COVID and a lot of the essential locations being open and others not being open, we had to quickly change our operating model to a curbside only model. So what we did is during that time we were able to maintain approximately about 81% of our last year's sales during the last 6 weeks of our Q1. We also saw our domestic comparable online sales increase 155.4%. So meaning, everything was shifting into that e-commerce and transaction. This is primarily due to the fact that when you're in curbside only, those are considered e-commerce transactions based off how the network rules are written. So we had to utilize those network rules in place today, which was an e-commerce transaction. And what we've typically seen is, innovation today is really happening. When we do see innovation in payments, it's happening in the e-commerce channel because it's kind of in order for us to move quickly and innovate. A lot of the times we have to kind of move it forward in an e-commerce channel versus in those retail kind of the way that retail channels are set up. As we know, from a merchant perspective, we have higher costs when it comes to an e-commerce transaction, as well as we own that fraud liability shift. So we had to factor that into our overall change in operating model. So what we saw then when we entered Q1, we were in a curbside only model with no in-store customer shopping. And at the beginning of Q2, we started to welcome customers back into our stores with appointment only in-store consultation. That was on June 15, then we began allowing customers to shop without an appointment at more than our 800 stores across the US. And as of June 22nd, almost all of our stores were open for shopping. So for the full Q2, our domestic online revenue grew 240% from last year. Even when stores opened for customer shopping, online sales growth continued to be extremely strong. In fact, in the last 7 weeks of the Q2, our online revenue grew approximately 180% over the same period last year. So along with this news, we communicated that we saw an increased cost with higher supply chain as a result of that increased mix of online revenue. So this is once again pointing back to it's an e-commerce transaction. From a merchant perspective, we see higher costs and we see that fraud liability shift over to us. So some of those hurdles that we encountered were continuing to meet that customer need, where and when they wanted to shop, and make sure that we had the right model to exceed those needs. And since this was a big shift to e-commerce, like holiday volumes, we needed to make sure that we could handle that bandwidth on .com and make sure that the systems remain stable.
Great, thanks, Joe. That was a great summary of some of the stuff you did, and we'll dig further into some of the obstacles with that later. But Sorin, I'd like to ask you. EG America doesn't just want people to show up and buy fuel. They also want them to buy products in their convenience stores, right? And you guys have been the master over the years on what you've done around loyalty. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that all worked together between loyalty and what was changing in the marketplace for you to continue to deliver to your consumers in a seamless manner?
Sure. Yeah. So as you had mentioned, we had started out with our loyalty platform almost 2 years ago. Coming from the IT side, our goal was really to interface with the pumps and enable the mobile payment. And while we were doing this, we actually introduced a new method of payment to our customers, the ACH platform, which also helped us in reducing the transaction fees. Fast forward to a few months ago, this had become a very frictionless customer experience while also reducing the touch points that our guests needed to make. So basically, you drive up to the pump, you select a pump number on your own mobile app from inside your car, you get out and pump. That's it. So as I said, we were doing this for probably about 8 years now, and we had a very captive and active customer base. This allowed us to quickly pivot over to curbside. So as you had mentioned, there are products in store that customers were not as comfortable walking inside. So the platform allowed us to quickly pivot to curbside. We've been toying around with the idea of curbside, but never really went down that path too far. But obviously, given the current situation, we're able to pivot quickly. Since we had full control over the platform itself, we really went from ideation all the way into a pilot in about 2 sprints, so roughly about 4 weeks. We then quickly learned from some of the real life experiences, and then together with my colleagues from marketing and operations, we were live in a significant number of stores within like a 6-week period. And what we've seen is an increased interest and demand on our pizza service, which is something that we had thought that it was going to come, but we weren't really sure about how it was going to impact our business, and we were kind of pleasantly surprised. And the other component that we did, which I'm not sure if anyone has really done this yet, but we're doing both curbside and pump side. So we have noticed, somebody driving home at their pump, pumping the fuel, and then we deliver the pizza out to the pump. So that's been a little bit unique in our space, and again, it also has to do with the footprint of our stores, where parking is at a premium just because of the size of the lot. So we've been able to extend it that way as well.
Great, thanks, Sorin. Those are some great examples. And Jamie, I know that you guys had all sorts of opportunities that you worked on to make the environment more seamless. And I'd just love to hear some of the experiences that you guys had and implemented, and how the customers reacted to it when you did so.
Sure. But if I can make one point, John, before, just a point of clarity in the introduction, I didn't have anything to do with stocking toilet paper or getting that in stock. So hopefully there's someone on that, because those merchants are working hard to try to keep the items that customers are working, that they needed in stock. And we all know the story around toilet paper and some of those other essentials. But yeah, so we, like one of the key learnings that we had, John, along the way was we really just need to be nimble and flexible. And as Joe talked about, ability to meet the customer where they want to be. They didn't know they wanted to be there in some cases until we got thrust into this pandemic situation. And so some of the changes that we made from a payments perspective, we really took a deep dive into the overall customer journey from the payments perspective in itself, and really tried to remove those touch points. And we use the term touchless. We hear a lot about contactless, but as we all know, if you're the payment geeks that we are, at least the 4 of us here, and there may be some in the audience as well, contactless in the payments industry has a definite specific meaning around the tap and go of a card or a phone. And so we try to use the language of touchless, trying to remove those touch points that customers would have on their payment experience. And so even when customers were using our mobile application in our Walmart US stores, our Walmart Pay application, there were still points where they had to touch the screen. So the team, changed our product roadmaps quickly, and kind of almost threw out the window, if you will. Some of those were accelerated, but then new points of just trying to remove those of confirmations and things of that nature. And then some of our transactions where we saw low usage of, for example, cash back with some of our tender types. We removed some of those prompts just to take those points off. But then, as similar to what Sorin and Joe, their companies went down the path as well. We were, headed down a similar path with allowing a pickup experience for groceries, so allow customers to go online, order their groceries, schedule their time, and come through and pick it up. We saw that we needed to accelerate that. We were doing that pre-COVID, starting to roll that out, but it got to be a feature or a service that customers became a lot more interested in. And so we accelerated that and moved that to more stores across our chain, and just some other areas where we accelerated. And that's where I was really proud to say our team at Walmart, our tech team and our product team, is a lot of these were already in the works, some in pilot or some in early stage rollout. And so it wasn't that we needed to go, create absolutely new experiences across the board. We accelerated a lot of these. In some cases, they were new experience, but for example, the acceptance of EBT government benefits online. We had on our roadmap and working in partnership with FNS and the USDA that 4 states were going to be enabled for the complete year of 2020. And when the pandemic hit and that became a lot more crucial for that customer base to be able to use that online service, we accelerated that through the partnership with those government agencies. Now it's 45 states. And so just looking at how we could look and service those customers in these new journeys, some of them at our Sam's Club, for example, we did put in a concierge service for customers that maybe weren't as comfortable or fluent as going online and ordering and then going to pick up. We would allow that customer to come, with their handwritten list, and get in outside the club, a pickup spot outside the club, and hand that over to our associate. They would go and do the pick for them. And so just trying to understand, how to be nimble and flexible and meet the customer demands, in this new and changing environment. Just one more example I'll give too of one of the lessons that we learned, John. In working with some of our partners, we work with payment processors, and they've got alarms or triggers set on some of our key metrics. And one of the changes we had to make in our store operations was, we reduced our store operating hours from 24/7 down to, something less than that. We were still open 7 days a week, but in some instances we went to 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. when that store is used to making transactions around the clock. And then all of a sudden, this is where the communication is key and some of the unintended consequences, if you will. Alarms and triggers started to go off with our partners because they weren't seeing transactions flow at 11 o'clock or 1 p.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning used to, because we changed our store operating hours. So, and rightfully so, right? There should have been transactions, but systems that have been put in place to monitor and make sure that we're able to service our customers, those all had to take a step back and crawl back through them so that we didn't experience any more unintended consequences with alarms triggering because there were 0 transactions at certain times of the day all of a sudden. So it was strange activity like that, but lots of lessons learned, I'd say.
I bet. I mean, it is a totally different environment than what you guys were used to. And I've been so impressed by how you've all been able to react in order to fulfill those basic essential needs that needed to be fulfilled for the consumers. But it couldn't have been easy, right? You guys it had to come with hurdles that you faced. Why don't you guys talk about some of those bigger challenges that you faced in trying to go from that environment where you were used to somebody showing up in your stores and making purchases to where now you're fulfilling it in multiple different formats?
I can jump in there first if it's all right with you guys. So, one of the things that, a lot of operations and companies, and Walmart included, where it was possible, we moved to remote work situations. And so, one of the initiatives that we had on our roadmap and we were starting to pilot was similar to what Sorin talked about. We had a mobile pay at the pump, and so allowed customers to use their mobile application to cut down on the interactions with the pumps. And now it got to where you could just scan a QR code with the app, and the customer had to just pick up the pump. We haven't got to that point yet where we could figure out how to get the pump off or the handle off the pump and into your vehicle, but we removed all the other touches. One of the challenges we had is, as you're rolling out those new type of services, those need to be tested in a lab environment. And when you're in a remote work situation, some of those key folks didn't have access to the lab earlier on in the year when we first moved to remote. Where we're trying to figure out how we do shift to this remote work environment. So some of those initiatives were unfortunately paused for a period of time until we could get the remote working situation figured out and be able to operate in the guidelines that both our company and the state and federal government put out. Thankfully, we're able to get that figured out and roll services like that out to our customers so they could continue to use that. But one that we had to figure out pretty quick is now everyone's at home. How do we still get the work done?
Yeah, and I would say that was also a challenge for us. I mean, obviously, we always want to ensure great end-to-end experience for our guests, and that meant we don't only just tackle the technology, but more importantly, we need to align with marketing and operations to deliver that experience that, typically we would have done that in a much more planful manner and have a lot more time to actually vet it out and flush everything out. We just needed to move fast, right? So I think one of the biggest challenges that we had was timeline. It was related around kind of getting that solution out there as quickly as we can, but at the same time make sure that that it's fully functional and operational, and not just from a technology perspective, but also from operations, because we're introducing new processes at store level. All this while dealing with, as Jamie said, shifting store hours. And managing additional processes in the store related to COVID and to cleaning and all of that stuff. So I think that was probably our biggest challenge, was making sure that we all kind of all the areas within the organization kind of stayed lockstep and moved forward towards that common goal.
Great, and I know you guys. You talked a little bit about it when you were doing your initial comments, but right, none of us operate in a vacuum. All of us rely on multiple partners throughout the stream, especially in the fuel space. I mean, those who've operated in the fuel space know how complicated that can be, based on whether it's the pump you need to get somebody to do, the controller with inside the building, the gateway that you're using with that. But whatever, how did you guys find working with your partners, and what were some of the ways that through the initiatives with partners you brought solutions to market?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, our focus going on the curbside model was really, we didn't have a lot of dependencies on external partners, because we already had that baseline split up and implemented. So we already had those touch points and that interactivity enabled. For us, it was more working internally and making sure that we're all aligned to communicate well across the entire organization, ensuring that everybody's aware of what is coming and what the timelines are, because given the speed with which we were moving, having a miscommunication would have created a significant challenge. So I think that was, for us, it was really more internally and focusing internally on how we deliver this solution.
Yeah, I could just jump in there, and it's somewhat similar as far as the lesson learned and what the key points were, is just communication. Communication is so key with where we're shifting priorities, how we're getting the work done, both with internal and external partners. I referenced earlier the change in plan with the USDA and FNS on EBT acceptance. Again, going from 4 to 45 states in a matter of months. It took I think almost 2 years to get the first state up and running, and the next 45 took a lot less than that. But just communicating the needs and what we're seeing from customers to in that case FNS and how this was going to be impactful to customers, and how it would enable this pickup service that was part of our larger strategy to be able to service customers, and then working with our other payment processors on the shift in volume. Joe referenced that earlier, from what we saw in store to what we saw more of an omni-channel, which is a different transaction type, as payment geeks understand, and just trying to understand sometimes those run through different platforms, and so making sure there's capacity, and making sure that even working with our bank partners to understand that here's an example. The transaction size changed, because people would when they would come into the store or do their pickup, they were building bigger baskets, and so we saw the number of transactions actually go down, especially during the early points of COVID. But when they did venture out to either come in the store or do a pickup, they had much bigger baskets, and so number of transactions down, dollar value of transactions up, and that just looks different to our fraud systems that we work. Both have internal partners and external partners, as well as our payment processors, as well as the banking partners, and so trying to just understand the change in consumer behavior, and there's a reason for that change, and so we need to make sure that those transactions can still flow. but and then a shift in tender type. Joe alluded to that earlier, but we saw a significant decrease in cash for obvious reasons, that people weren't necessarily coming in the stores, or if they were, they didn't really want to handle cash as much. And we saw a lot more connections with electronic forms of payments. And so just, again, working with our partners that monitor fraud and authorization were key.
So, Jamie, you mentioned the whole description between contact. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, I know I'm having a hard time hearing a little bit. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Oh,
sorry, I'm having my audio is not catching up quite quickly. So,
okay.
I was just going to say, I think from one of the things that we are seeing is collaboration. I mean, that's obviously is key, especially from a payment industry. And so I think a lot of the things that we've worked on, we've had, especially with the new use cases that have popped up from a COVID perspective, is we've collaborated with our acquirers on how those different messaging could go through. We've had conversations with the MAG and with the networks on the rules and processes and how we can continue to make those better, and how we can have more fully authenticated transactions and just more or less pull the fraud out of the system versus just continuing to shift fraud back and forth. And I think the other thing we've done is we've had some individual conversations with issuers as well on fraud in the industry. Obviously, as COVID kind of took off, and we've had to make changes to overall how we're accepting payments, as fraud has definitely picked up. And so we were having those conversations, explaining kind of what our processes are, make sure issuers understand the different things that we are doing to kind of help them with their strategy as well, to make sure we continue to meet our customers' needs and have good approvals across the board. So I just kind of hit on that collaboration piece, because I think that is very key as far as how we continue to have these conversations and move the payment discussions in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
That's a great point, Joe, because like we talked about, is that everybody in the payment ecosystem has a unique view into that transaction and how that experience happens, and the only way to get a full view of it is to have all the people talking together. And when that happens, we can see change that happens in a positive manner that helps what we're all trying to do, which is service that end customer. So that's a great example, Joe, of working through those issues to make sure you can service your customers as well as possible.
Yeah.
Jamie, you mentioned when we were talking on your opening about this contactless and touchless, and we've been having this internal discussion with the merchants groups overall about what do we think will happen post-COVID. And some of you now have opened up stores and you're seeing some more normalization of your traffic. So where do you see the things that you implemented that seem sticky to the customers, where you think they'll keep growing and accelerating from where they were? And what are some of those habits that you think probably may just go away as they become less concerned about the environment? Sure.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see some of the data come through and the transactions, and it's really customer behavior. So I mentioned earlier we saw a decrease in usage of cash. Earlier on, we're starting to see that come back again. So it's not back to where, at least in our environment, not completely back at the level of, but it's getting a lot closer. So I think customers will start to normalize back to that behavior. If they were using cash before, most of them were using it for a reason. So I think that they come back to that. But I also think that that some of those transactions will migrate over and will be more omni-channel, because as this whole situation, the pandemic, spurred on us, it made customers rethink how they interact in their lives, not just in retail environment or in the gas in stores, but overall. And so anything that you can do to help them, and this is really what we're focused overall as a company, but especially our payments team at Walmart, is how can we save your time and save them money? And a lot of that, convenience is currency these days. And so how can we make the shopping experience that much more convenient to customers? So, we saw an uptake in our pickup, order ahead and pickup service. And I think some customers that maybe would have been hesitant to try that, would have been behind the bell curve, if you will. They accelerated or expedited their trial of those type of experiences. So I think once they went through the effort to go through and set up that environment, or that that service and they realize the benefit that they get out of that, they'll continue to leverage that because it'll continue to save them time and be convenient in the future. So I think things like that will continue to stick around. But I think other behaviors will fall back to habits. People are creatures of habit unless they're spurred to change. And obviously, the pandemic was a big spur to change. But then I think some will fall back. So it's been very interesting to observe.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're seeing the same thing as well. So the touchless and contactless payment has obviously gone up significantly. The reduction of cash is the same. To what you're seeing, Jamie, as well. We are seeing an uptick back up, but nowhere near where it used to be. What I'd say is we're also seeing an additional demand for speed, right? So as a convenience store, our goal is to be convenient, and the customer now basically wants to come in and get out. It's speed of transaction and speed of delivery of the product. Interestingly, what we're also seeing is a desire to actually witness the cleaning of the store, right? So before we used to do the cleaning in quiet times, off hours, and so on. Now it's almost expected to be visible to be cleaning while the guests are in the store. So that's been an interesting change to typical habits, I guess.
Yeah. If I could jump back in real quick though on the contactless and touchless, I'll just hit that point again. And John, you brought that up. We use that terminology touchless because it's more than just the payment experience. It's the overall shopping journey. And so at our Sam's Club, for example, one of the applications that services that we had, and this was definitely pre-COVID, we may have lost Joe there.
Yeah, well, we'll keep going. Hopefully we'll get him back.
Hopefully he can rejoin because I know he's got some great information to share as well and steps that Best Buy took. But in our Sam's Club, we have our Scan and Go mobile application. That was way before COVID. We've had that out for a number of years now. And what that is it's a mobile application that's part of the bigger Sam's Club app. And that allows people to go around the club, scan their items, essentially build up their basket, and then you can check out right on your phone and skip the traditional in-lane experience altogether and go right to the door. So hit pay on your phone, go right to the door. Well, that's a touchless experience because as close to touchless as you can get because you're not having to interact with anyone else other than the door greeter that says got everything, kind of checks your QR code, but again, there's no physical touching. And then the order online and pickup, and there's not a lot of interaction compared to the typical in-store shopping journey. And so the touchless shopping experience is much, much more than just the payment experience. And so that's why we really try to move to that language, if you will.
I agree totally with you, Jamie. For me personally, my first experience with a order ahead was done at a Walmart. And it was such a flawless experience from where you order online, you signal to the store that you're there, and basically you just open up your trunk and they bring it and set it in there. And that, I think you're absolutely right, is customers look at, especially those who have a time crunch, right? I mean, no mom or dad enjoys bringing in 3 kids to go shopping, right? I mean, the toy aisle is like a torture for them. And if they can figure out a way in order for them to make that happen more effectively, and once they've put the time and effort in to learn it, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We'll continue to see those type of transactions. You guys know that our audience here really is a lot of innovators, people who are out there in the market trying to figure out how to develop products to do those solutions. And I'm sure you guys in your positions talk to those people all of the time, where they come and they talk to you about whatever the latest and greatest they've invented and they want to implement. What kind of advice would you give them that would help their chances of you actually saying yes when they show up at your location at implementing something that they're bringing to you and thinking that it's solving a solution or creating a solution?
Yeah, from my perspective, it's just open collaboration. As a techie, it's all about open APIs for me, right? The ability to interact with whatever systems, platforms, processes, what have you. Obviously, need to have quick implementation times because The times of us having months and months and months for projects have now been significantly compressed. So quick implementation times is key. Seamless integration is obviously another one. Having the ability to have a unified user experience across multiple platforms is also a big thing for us. And last but not least, a highly secure platform that leverages AI to help manage by exception. Those are kind of the areas that I would bring up.
Yeah, I think all those are spot on, Soren, and I'll just add on to those. I mean, API based tech is almost table stakes these days. The other thing I'll say is just on that side, if you can have a portal or a sandbox for our developers to each other, that is extremely helpful. And then I'll say this, I talked to my tech team. I said, "What do you want these guys to hear?" Because the product business guy, and those are, once we do the deal, then the tech guys got to work together. And so I wanted to bring forth that perspective as well. And some of the things that they said is, make sure they've got a comprehensive SDK library. That's important to allow the developers to engage with each other and speak the same language as we were talking about earlier, touchless, contactless, so forth. Security, to Soren's point, I hit on that again. That it's secure, it can be scalable. You got thorough documentation, because we may have the ability to go and say, okay, yeah, let's play with this in the sandbox, but then to get it in production, we've got to be able to meet our compliance requirements and regulation requirements and so forth. So to have all that documented around what you've done in your testing and make sure it is thoroughly tested, all that is going to be super critical to move fast, because a lot of times, again, we can do the deal, sign the agreement, and get things up and running in the sandbox, but to get it into production where we all want to see it and customers start using it, we've got to be able to check those boxes. We all have very sophisticated environments. Check out those point of sale environments are some of the most sophisticated, complex, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's older tech and legacy tech that we're trying to patch into, and so making this new tech work with some of that older tech, that very comprehensive documentation. Another thing I'll say, and this is I don't know a better way to put this, but it's a balance between having a proven solution that's been tested, but then I can't think of very many times at all that we take something straight off the shelf and just use it as is. Because of those complex, sophisticated environments, we usually need some sort of adaptation or needs to be modified. So in order for it to be nimble and flexible, and I'll just hit on Soren's point on the collaboration. The earlier we can talk to you, to help to make sure that what you're working on can work in our environment. If it's a gas pump situation or multi-lane, high volume, omni-channel environment, things of that nature. So it's I wouldn't say wait to the very end and bring us this thing and say, here, do you want this? Because we're probably going to need some modifications to it. But at the other side, if it's so early on and it's not tested thoroughly and not proven out, then it's difficult to get our security folks and compliance folks and those guys comfortable with implementing. But I'll pause now that we got Joe back.
We've got just about a minute and a half. So I don't know, Joe, did you have anything else you wanted to make sure you expressed before we close it out?
Yeah, no, so sorry about my technology issues. I think the guy from Best Buy would be okay here, but hopefully we'll have the last minute and a half good. So no, based off what I just heard from Jamie, I missed Soren's, but I think we're very similar as far as some of the things. Obviously bring a solution to a problem, not a problem to a solution, right? So we want to Jamie's point, I think we need to collaborate early and more often to make sure that we're understanding what are the the issues that we're working towards, and then being able to come up with a solution together versus just providing a solution and trying to figure out how we back into the problem. And I think security, obviously it's a must. And I think the other piece I just want to hit on is obviously with the change in the kind of operating models today, a lot of the things that we're looking at now going forward, and I think a lot of merchants are looking at going forward, is having that digital first kind of strategy, right? Looking at, as these solutions come out, how do we now start to meet the customers where they want to shop if they are shifting to digital, is make sure we're looking at that as a digital first type of solution.
Great. So I'm going to just wrap it up. We've just got about 20 seconds left. You guys did a phenomenal job. I wish we had another half an hour, because I think you had a lot more that you would have liked to discuss with this audience. But thank you very much for making the time. Our overall message from a merchant standpoint, and you heard it from them, is right, solutions happen through collaboration. And the sooner we can all get in a room and talk about how to make those solutions, the sooner we can get them to market. So appreciate you guys, and thanks for making the time today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.